Hi, my name is Narwani Kunal Hariram, studying in Education University of Hong Kong, currently in year 2, studying Bachelor of Education in Primary Mathematics. Well, I was studying in a ethnic minority majority group of school, which is called Delia Memorial School of Broadway. And when it comes to learning with my kind of people, it's quite friendly because we do have our own interaction compared to if I were to be with Chinese. But when it comes to discipline, it's quite horrible because we do tend to be more active with our thoughts and be more active with our activities and things like that. But overall, if you do have your own kind of motivation, I think you'll be fine in a school like this. But that would be my major experience with the students and the teachers. Teachers' experience. Well, a lot of them were quite forthcoming. They'd really want to help. They want us to educate. They want to educate us, but eventually they'll reach to a point where the classes are being segregated, where the better students are in one class and the worse students are in the other one, and it tends to be in this way. Like the better teachers will be teaching the better classes because they have more hope in them, so they think that they will go to the universities or further education and stuff like that. But they tend to sort of look down on the other students, but not so much as to just neglect them. It's just to somewhat not have as much hope as they would have in the other better two classes. Yeah. Better teacher, well, first of all, I would say more passionate. That's like more intrinsic. And then when it comes to trying to educate the student, they would be putting effort. For example, I'd use my math teacher as a really good example because he was with us for 5 years. We weren't giving him the best of times, but he'd be giving his full effort, trying to help us with our mathematical ideas, our answers, our work ethics, and things like that. And even though it might seem like we're not putting enough effort or we're lacking behind, it wouldn't be that he's gonna just stop and give up on us, but instead he'd have extra tutorials, and that's when it comes to the students whether they want to go for the tutorials. Yeah, so that's one of the better examples. When it comes to the other classes, it's really about segregating. Either the students themselves, they want to be segregated out of learning anything or being less taught, and there would be some better students who will be, or more active students who are going to be in front trying to listen to the teacher. But I would say as a teacher, you have the responsibility of trying to incorporate all the students because you are the teacher for the whole class, not half the class. So that's why I would say better or not so good. Yeah. My favorite Chinese teacher, she what she did was she was rather friendlier. I think she understood the mindset that we have because if I compare the local Chinese students with our ethnic minorities, the local Chinese prefer to sit quiet in class and just listen to the teacher, whatever they're gonna say, and apply it directly onto the paper whatsoever. But for us, as I said, we're more active. We don't want to just be in one point, just sitting and listening to the teacher. We want to maybe move around a little bit or be more interactive. And that's what our Chinese teacher did. She was following the content from the textbooks, but it wasn't like she's just telling us what it is, what is on the book. Instead, she would have like a small little group game where we're going to be competing against each other, or she'd be talking to us, making examples using our names and not just using random names like, for example, Meng Meng or Chan Chan or something like that, right? Instead, she'd be using, let's say, my name, Kunal, so like Kunal, hi, Yan Yan, something like that. It's just a very simple example. And I think being more emotionally attached as well, because when you're putting your heart into teaching or when you're putting your heart into trying to educate us something we're so new to, it gives us the motivation as well to see and to be more active with what we're doing. Because if the teacher's willing to put so much effort, why should we stay back? Yeah. When it comes to uh, stating some vocabularies in Chinese, so we'd be having some content on the book itself, and so it wouldn't be like she'd directly write the vocabs needed on the blackboard. Instead, she'd give us some time to go through it. What do you understand? What do you not understand? And then after that, she's going to be asking students, or by name, like, okay, John, tell me what is this word or what's the meaning of this word? How do you pronounce it? and then she'd ask us to make a sentence out of it if possible. And when it comes to interacting with groups, when it comes to writing practices where you have to write, for example, a letter of agreement, a letter to your friend. So we'd be in groups trying to figure out what kind of words do we need and how we can help each other out. And she'd be walking around, obviously, trying to make sure that everyone's moving forward and not just being stuck in a hole or something like that. Yeah. In LS, liberal studies, we did have a lot of opportunities to have group interaction, but the teacher's motivation seemed like it wasn't so, or it wasn't as great as the Chinese teacher, because he was very monotone. That's the first thing. So when you have a monotone teacher, he will eventually allow us to sleep because of the voice quality, right? But my Chinese teacher, she was having more of it was like intonation and trying to express, or you could see the emotion or feel the emotion from her. So most of the times in LS lesson, we'd be a little half asleep and half trying to stay awake. So maybe it wasn't that effective because of just teacher's voice. However, most of the other subjects, I don't think there were much opportunities to be so interactive because of the tight schedule that the system is. There's a lot of content that we have to finish in a very short period of time, and that's why a lot of tutorials had to be given. I would say partly it's the students' fault because we're not as obedient or as how do you say, disciplined to listen to the teacher. That's first. Second is because there's so much content, the teachers cannot cover it overall by themselves. Yeah. So if we focus on learning Chinese, I think trying to apply it to real life situation. So for example, right now I am in the university and I am immersed into a very large or a very marginalized population of Chinese, and I'm really a small minority, and I'm absolutely not afraid to be with the Chinese, to interact with them. I do have very basic level communication ability, but if I were to tell my friends, or if I were to tell my brother or my mom that I've been studying Chinese for 12 years, they'd expect me to be able to at least be a little bit more fluent. But the reality is I'm not, because of the level of Chinese we were learning. Compared to local Chinese, if they were in Form 6, they'd be learning Form 6 level Chinese. But if we were in Form 6, we were still learning about like P5, P6 level Chinese. And which is, I think that's the major drawback, the step back to ethnic minorities' abilities to learn Chinese or to catch on. And the second thing would be the level of application how do you say, the ability to apply what we learn is very low, because we learn about specific topics. Like for example, festival, we learn about let's say communication, or we learn about media. So, and there are a lot of other topics based on every year. There are like about 4 to 5 topics. But the thing is, they're not exactly being focused on how we can apply or something, or some things that we could be using on a daily basis. So it makes it quite difficult for us to transfer the content which we've learned into our daily application. I think, well, first of all, the content was based on primary level Chinese. Second thing would be the confidence that maybe the government or the curriculum is giving or putting onto the ethnic minorities. I think they are doubting our ability maybe a little too much. Just because it's a new or different language doesn't mean we have to learn at such a low level and deprive us of learning about the same ability as the locals. I mean, for example, if I were to be in an international school, I would be learning English first of all, and then they'd be teaching French maybe. And the French, they wouldn't be telling me about a primary 3 level while I'm in grade 9. They'd be giving me grade 9 level while I'm in grade 9. So that is one of the biggest issues about the confidence level which the government is putting on us. Given that we're the minority, we see a lot of things, or we see a lot of groups being in their larger groups while we are quite minoritized, if that's a word. Yeah. So we do feel the need of being in a group, or we feel the need of emerging, or I mean immersing ourselves into a bigger group, or feeling more like we belong, right? And if we're going to be taught in a way that we're already segregated by the teachers, then how do they expect us to not feel the same way when we're outside? So if they're willing to put, or if they have the ability to put hope in us, or have hope that we can learn, that we can succeed, or we can progress in the society, then it is first of all important to have a tougher content for us to adapt to, and second would be their mindset of seeing that we can learn, or we want to learn. Yeah. Speaking about culture, I think it is important for teachers to understand what is our culture, because it is quite likely they might mention some things which are more personal to us, and we might be a little offended by it. If the teachers don't understand that, then it's more likely for them to use it and make us feel more separated from them. So, for example, I mean, in my school, the majority ethnic minorities were Indians, Pakistanis, Nepalis, and well, others, including like Filipinos and Bangladeshis, right? So our cultures are different, but there are also a lot of similarities which we would not like to hear, or which we feel more offended by, right? So if there's somehow, maybe there's a course of understanding ethnic minorities through culture, something like that, which allows them to even be closer with the students, because uh, maybe it's my personal concept of teacher student relationship, that it has to be close in order for them to learn from each other. Obviously, yeah, there are cases where professional relationships between students and teachers succeeds, but if I were to look into the ethnic minorities context right now, I would say it's really important for them to have a more interactive relationship, and it's not necessary for them to be taught on how to teach, but it's to how to understand the students, and then I think they'll also be able to understand how to apply some things which they can teach, and how they can learn. Yeah. A few things which that teacher needs to be aware of or be prepared for is first of all, expect them to be undisciplined, or expect them to be active, because that is a part of, maybe that's a part of our nature, but don't take it as a disadvantage. You can take it as an advantage and use it to allow them to further progress and learn Chinese or other subjects. Do not stick to your roots on how you learned, because given that maybe it's a local, if they are going to teach Chinese, it's probably a local, right? And they learned in a way that it's about memorizing. So I would say do not use the word memorize. Although it is necessary for students to memorize, but I don't think it's a need to use the word memorizing to enforce it onto students, because I personally find the word memorizing very discouraging and very demotivating, and I think that's a part of the reasons why a lot of non-Chinese tend not to put effort in learning, because they have to first remember the written form, then the differences in the spoken form, and a lot of structures. Agreed, all the other languages have the same thing, but when you have to translate from written to spoken, where there's a lot of differences, it becomes very difficult. And if you're just going to tell us to memorize and actually not understand maybe how it is and how it is formed, it makes it very discouraging for students to learn Chinese. Yeah, don't be afraid to interact with ethnic minorities, whether they're teachers, they're locals, or anyone in Hong Kong. Just there might be a language barrier, but if you would want to learn more about them, don't be afraid to learn, because what would you lose by learning? Yeah.